The arrow split the doorframe of the crossroads clean in half, burying itself 3 inches into the old oak post, and Jeremiah Keller did not flinch. He was standing behind the bar with a cloth in one hand and a clay mug in the other, and he watched the orc woman stride through the door she had just nearly destroyed with the calm expression of a man who had seen worse on a slow Tuesday. She was tall enough that she had to tilt her chin slightly to clear the lintel, and when she straightened on the other side, she pulled every eye in the room with her the way a torch pulls moths. Not because she was threatening them, though she was clearly capable of it, but because she was absolutely the most striking person to cross that threshold in the 3 years Jeremiah had been running the inn. She wore fitted warrior's leathers, dark as charcoal and shaped to her like a second skin, a close-laced bodice of hardened hide over a linen undershirt dyed the color of pine shadow, the laces running up the center in a double column that framed a powerful feminine frame without hiding any of it. Her bracers were scarred iron, strapped tight to forearms corded with muscle. Her traveling trousers were tucked into knee-high boots, cracked at the toe and resoled at least twice, the leather supple from long use. A short cloak the color of dried blood hung from one shoulder, pinned with a flat iron clasp shaped like a tusk. She had the gray-green skin of the mountain clans and tusks that curved upward from her lower jaw, ivory-white and just long enough to catch the lamplight. Her black hair was twisted back into a warrior's braid threaded with small iron rings, and her eyes, when they found Jeremiah's across the room, were amber bright, furious, and trying very hard not to show that she was in pain. Her bow was in her left hand, or what was left of it. The limb had snapped at the grip. Not cleanly, it had splintered, the wood fraying into a jagged comb of splinters still wrapped by her bowstring, the whole thing hanging in 2 connected pieces like a broken arm, kept from falling only by the sinew. The arrow she had launched into his doorframe had probably been the last shot the bow had managed before the break. She held the ruined weapon down at her side as if she could force it to be whole again through sheer refusal to acknowledge what had happened to it. "I need a room," she said. Her voice was low and rough-edged, the consonants carrying the slight gravel of the Highland dialect. "1 night, maybe 2. The 3 merchants at the corner table had stopped their card game. A pair of drovers near the fire had gone very still. The only person still moving was old Marrett, Jeremiah's kitchen woman, who pushed through the back curtain with a pot of something that smelled like barley and herbs, took one look at the room, and went right back through the curtain again without a word. Jeremiah set the mug down. He walked the length of the bar, stepped around the end of it, and crossed to the doorframe. He took a good look at the arrow. He pulled it out with both hands and a single firm tug, turned it over once, and then looked at the woman. "It's 4 copper a night," he said. "Includes the morning meal. Bath water is 2 extra if you want it heated." She stared at him. She had very clearly prepared herself for something else, for him to reach for a weapon, or to point at the door, or to call for a guard who was not there anyway. He watched her recalibrate, the amber eyes narrowing, not in threat but in the specific kind of wariness that belongs to someone who has been turned away so many times they begin to treat acceptance as a trap. 4 copper, she said. 4 copper. A beat of silence. Then she reached into the pouch at her hip and produced the coins, and Jeremiah led her to the room at the end of the upper hall, the biggest one, with the window that faced east and the rope bed that was long enough that she would not have her feet hanging off the end. He handed her the key. She looked at it like she did not entirely know what to do with the gesture, then closed her fingers around it. "Vola," she said suddenly when he was halfway back down the hall. He stopped and turned. "My name," she said. "Vola Thunderroar, in case you need to know who broke your door." "Jeremiah Keller," he said. "In case you need to know whose door it was." He paused. "The arrow's yours if you want it back. It's good fletching." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she went into her room and closed the door, and the lock clicked, and Jeremiah went back downstairs to finish wiping the bar. The Crossroads Inn sat at the convergence of 3 roads at the edge of what people called the border market, a sprawling, disorganized stretch of stalls and pens and tents that had grown up over 2 generations at the place, where the human lowland territories rubbed against the foothills of Orc clan country. It was not a beautiful place. The roads were rutted, the stalls were patched canvas and rough timber, and the inn was the only building with more than one story. But coin changed hands their everyday human grain for Orc iron, lowland cloth for highland pelts, salt for copper and copper for salt. And wherever coin changed hands, people needed somewhere to sleep and eat. And so Jeremiah Keller had turned a crumbling way station into a working inn 3 years ago and had made it, if not prosperous, then at least stubbornly solvent. He was 31 years old. He was not remarkable to look at: average height, lean build, dark hair that he kept too long because he kept forgetting to cut it, a jaw that was usually 2 days past needing a shave. He had a small scar along his left brow from a fight he had not started and had not won, and his hands were rough from hauling wood and mending things that always seemed to be breaking. He had no family nearby. He had a few people he liked and no one he loved, and most nights after he locked up he sat by the dying fire with a cup of something warm and felt the specific weight of a silence that he had never quite found the right word for. The border market was quiet that season. There was a reason for it. 3 months back, Lord Orrin Crane, the younger brother of the recently dead Governor Haldon, had ridden into the market town of Orvest, 5 miles east, with a company of armed men and a letter he claimed gave him emergency governance powers over the border territory. The letter's seal was Haldon's, but Haldon's steward, a nervous man named Pell, had told anyone who would listen that the governor had never signed such a document. Pell had stopped talking about it 2 weeks later and no one knew where Pell had gone. Crane had started taxing the Orc traders, not a standard toll, the kind of tax designed to be a message: 60% on iron goods, 40% on livestock. The Orc clans had responded the way Orc clans responded to messages they didn't like. They had pulled back their traders, their drovers, and their caravans, and the border market had thinned to half its normal traffic. Jeremiah paid his taxes on time and kept his head down and kept the inn running. That was what he did. He kept things running. He lay awake that first night thinking about the bow. It was not just broken. It was a warrior's bow, the kind that took a skilled bowyer months to make, and he had seen the way Vola held it, close to her body, slightly turned away from him as if she did not want him to see the damage. There was something private about that. Something that made him think the bow was not just a weapon to her. He got up before dawn, lit the small lamp in the workshop behind the kitchen, the room where he fixed everything, the door hinges and the barrel staves and the wagon spokes of travelers who needed quick repairs, and he went through his materials. He had linen thread. He had good hide glue, the kind that set hard and clear. He had strips of sinew he kept for the purpose of lashing repairs. He had a small amount of horn, left over from a handle repair job. And he had worked with wood long enough to know that a bow limb, if the grain was sound and the break was a clean one, could sometimes be repaired well enough to last. Not to its original tension, but to function. He went upstairs and knocked softly on the door at the end of the hall. She opened it immediately, which meant she had not been sleeping either. She was still dressed. The lamplight from his hand caught the amber of her eyes and the edge of her tusks, and she looked at him the way she might look at something that had walked into her arrow's path without knowing what it was doing. "I need to see the bow," he said. "If you'll let me." A silence. "Why?" "Because I think I can fix it." She studied him for a long moment. He could feel her reading him the way people learn to read strangers in border country, looking for the angle, the trap, the price that had not been named yet. He waited. He was good at waiting. She stepped back from the door and held the bow out to him. He took it carefully, turned it in the lamplight, ran his thumb along the break. The grain had not exploded outward the way bad wood did. It had sheared cleanly along a line, probably a stress fracture that had been there a while, a flaw in the original wood that heat or cold or one too many heavy draws had finally finished. He flexed it gently to check for secondary cracks. Nothing he could see. "I cannot promise it will pull at full draw again," he said honestly. "But if you give me until morning, I can make it safe to use." She was watching his hands. She had been watching them since he had first taken the bow. Her expression was complicated, something hard working against something she was trying to suppress. "You know bowcraft," she said. "I know fixing things," he said. "It's not quite the same." "No," she said. "It is not." She let him take it. He went back to the workshop and spent 2.5 hours in the lamplight, cleaning the break, fitting the surfaces together with the precision of a man who understood that a bad repair was worse than none, pressing the hide glue into the grain with a flat stick, and wrapping the joint in sinew with a tension that matched the original lashing pattern as closely as he could manage. He added a thin horn plate on the back of the splice for rigidity and wrapped that too. And when he had finished, he set it to cure in the warm corner by the flue where the heat from the kitchen below rose through the floor. Then he wiped his hands and went to sit by the dying fire in the common room and did not sleep. When he heard her on the stairs just after dawn, he was already up, coffee, or the bitter local substitute that passed for it in hand, the bow on the bar in front of him. He had set it there without thinking about the fact that she would see it the moment she came in. He had just put it where the light hit it best. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs and looked at the bow for so long that he became suddenly, acutely conscious of the possibility that he had overstepped. That he had taken a thing that was hers and done something to it without permission, however good his intentions, and that in orc warrior culture, which he understood imperfectly, from second-hand stories and a handful of conversations, a warrior's weapon was not a thing you laid hands on without being asked. She walked to the bar slowly. She picked up the bow. She ran her fingers along the repair the way he had run his thumb along the break carefully, reading it. She flexed it gently first, then with increasing draw. The splice held. He had used enough sinew to be sure of that. She stared at her hands. He watched it happen, the thing that crossed her face when she looked at the bow hole in her grip. It was not just relief, and it was not just surprise. It was something that landed much lower than either of those, something that pulled at the muscles around her eyes and jaw and made her go very still, the way a person goes still when they are caught off guard by a feeling they do not have the defenses prepared for. She looked at her own hands as if they were telling her something she needed to verify, as if the bow being whole in them was evidence of something she had not known she was waiting to see proven. She did not say thank you immediately. She just stood there with the bow in her hands and her eyes on her hands, and the morning light coming through the east window he had put her in specifically for the east morning light, and Jeremiah poured a second cup of bitter coffee and set it on the bar beside her without a word. She finally looked up. "You did this without being asked," she said. It was not an accusation, but it was not entirely comfortable either. It was the statement of someone trying to categorize something that would not fit any existing category. "I did," he said. "Why?" He picked up his own cup. He thought about it seriously because the question deserved that. "Because it was broken," he said, "and I knew how to fix it, and it seemed like a bad thing for it to stay broken." She looked at him for a long time. Then she sat down on the nearest stool, pulled the cup of coffee to her, and drank half of it in one go. "It was my mother's bow," she said. He did not say anything. He waited. "She was a better archer than I am. She was better at most things." A pause. "She has been dead for 5 years. The bow has been mine for 5 years, and this is the first time I have broken it." "Did you break it in a fight?" She set the cup down. "I broke it because a border tax collector decided that the toll he had set for my trade goods was optional, and that what he really wanted was the goods themselves and my compliance in handing them over quietly." Her jaw set. "I did not comply quietly. He had 4 men. I had the bow and my short blades and a piece of luck that will not repeat itself." "Did you come out of it whole?" "Mostly." She said it the way people said it when they were not going to elaborate. Jeremiah thought about Oren Crane's tax collectors, who had been through the market twice in the past month with an increasingly confident sense of what they could take, and he thought about the fact that Vola Thunderroar had come through his door last night with a broken bow and amber eyes that were burning at the edges with something very much like barely contained fury, and he thought that whatever had happened on whatever road she had come from was probably not over. The collectors, he said. Were they flying Crane's colors? Her head came up. You know Crane. Everyone within a day's ride of Orvast knows Crane, he said, or knows enough to want to know more. He has been collecting at a rate that doesn't leave the orc traders enough margin to keep coming, and when the orc traders stop coming, the whole market dries up. He paused. He knows that too, which makes me wonder what he actually wants. Vola set the bow down on the bar and folded her hands around her cup. She looked at him with an expression that had shifted, fractionally, from the wary categorization she had been doing since she arrived into something closer to genuine engagement. He wants the market itself, she said, not the taxes, the land. The crossroads land has mineral rights under it. There is iron ore in the hills behind the market, more than anyone has gotten around to extracting, because there has never been a single power with enough soldiers to hold all three roads simultaneously. Crane wants to be that power. He is using the taxes to drive out the orc clans, so the treaty that grants joint access to the market territory lapses on the orc side. When the treaty lapses, the land reverts to lowland law. Under lowland law, he inherits it as acting governor. She looked at her cup. I know this because the clan elders know this. I was sent here to find out if any of the human traders in the market know it too. Jeremiah put his cup down. Are you a messenger or a warrior? I'm a warrior who got sent because the messenger's crane has already intercepted twice. She flexed her hand around the coffee cup. I was not supposed to have a confrontation with his collectors on the road. That was not the plan. And now your bow is repaired and you have told all of this to the innkeeper, he said. Is the innkeeper who he seems to be, or should I be concerned about that? The corner of her mouth did something. It was not quite a smile. It was the precursor of one, contained at the last moment. The innkeeper, she said, fixed my mother's bow at 4 in the morning without being asked and did not charge me extra for it. That is a reasonably reliable indicator of character. He did feel the warmth of that, somewhere in his chest. He picked his cup back up. The merchants I can point you to are the Fenwick brothers, the linen traders who come through on the third market day. They have been feeling the tax pressure, and they have been vocal about it among themselves, which means they're frustrated enough to listen. There is also a woman named Adara Sull, who runs the spice stall nearest the South Road. She has connections to the lowland trade guilds, and if anyone can get a formal complaint to the actual seat of governance before Crane consolidates his grip, it would go through her. He paused. I can make the introductions. Vola looked at him, really looked at him the way she had looked at the repaired bow, as if confirming that what she was seeing was real. Why? She said again. Because the market drying up is bad for everyone, including me, he said, and because what Crane is doing is not right. She made a sound in the back of her throat that he was fairly sure was the Highland clan equivalent of a concession. The bow, she said, picking it up again and running her thumb along the splice. This work is good, better than I expected. I have had practice. She held it out and sighted along the unstrung limb, checking for warp. She found none. She held it at rest, feeling the weight distribution. He watched her and saw the way her shoulders settled, not a relaxation but a returning, like something that had been out of alignment had found its proper place. I will stay 2 nights, she said. And I will need those introductions. Done, he said. She stood, tucked the bow under her arm, and headed back toward the stairs. She paused with one hand on the post at the bottom. Jeremiah Keller, she said, like she was fixing the name. Still me, he said. This time she did not contain it. The corner of her mouth curved, slow and brief, and then she was up the stairs and gone, and he was left in the morning light with 2 empty cups and the particular, warm, slightly puzzled feeling of a man who has just had his morning entirely reordered by someone who arrived through his door like weather. The second day at the border market was a third market day, which meant the Fenwick brothers were there. Jeremiah walked with Vola through the market in the mid-morning. keeping slightly to her left and half a step behind, not because he was deferring to her, but because it was the position from which he could make introductions most naturally, and also because it meant he could watch the market's reaction to her arrival without her having to watch it herself. He had done this before with orc traders, absorbed the initial flinch on their behalf, the double takes, the way certain stall holders found something suddenly absorbing to look at on their own shelves. She walked through all of it like it was weather she had decided not to acknowledge. Head up, bow slung across her back, repaired, functional, whole, one hand loose at her side and the other resting on the hilt of the short blade at her hip. Not threatening, just present, just taking up the space she was entitled to and not apologizing for it. Jeremiah noticed that she got stares, but she also got something else, a kind of grudging acknowledgement from the market's older traders, the ones who had been in the border country long enough to know what an orc warrior walking in peace looked like versus what one walking for other reasons looked like. They watched her with something closer to respect than hostility, even if they were careful not to make it obvious. The Fenwick brothers were set up with a bolt-cloth wagon under a striped awning, and they were both barrel-chested men with red faces and a family resemblance so strong it was almost architectural. The older one, Don, saw Jeremiah and lifted a hand, and then his eyes found Vola and his hand dropped slightly before he made himself raise it again. "Don," Jeremiah said easily, "this is Vola Thunderroar, a Highland clan warrior. She has information about Crane's tax strategy that I think you need to hear. I will vouch for her." Don Fenwick looked at him for a long second. Then he looked at Vola. Then he let out a breath and said, "Talk fast. I've got a buyer coming in an hour." Vola talked. She was precise, and she was organized, and she clearly had thought about how to present the information to humans who might not understand the treaty mechanism she was describing. She laid it out in terms of trade margins and timeline, and what would happen to the market's trade volume in 6 months if nothing changed. Don Fenwick's face went from cautious to attentive to alarmed over the course of about 8 minutes, and when she was done, he called over his brother Ren and had her say it again. "The mineral rights," Ren said. "That's the engine of this whole thing." "Yes," Vola said. "And Crane knows that the second the orc clans formally withdraw from the treaty, the clock starts." "The clock started when his collectors began the punitive taxation," she said. "He has already moved it forward." Ren looked at Jeremiah. "Is she right? About Crane wanting the land?" "Yes. About the treaty mechanism. I don't know the law well enough to be certain, but I know a woman who does." He tilted his head. "Adara Sul." They went to Adara Sul next. She was a small, sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who ran the best-stocked spice stall in 3 counties and who had, Jeremiah suspected, more political connections than she ever let people know about. She listened to Vola the way she did everything, completely still, completely focused, not interrupting once. When Vola finished, Adara said, "The treaty has a contested standing clause. If the orc clans can prove the taxation was designed specifically to coerce treaty withdrawal rather than to raise revenue, Crane's claim to the land reverts. But they need to prove it in front of a lawful arbiter, not Crane's own appointed magistrates." "There is a circuit arbiter," Vola said carefully, "who reaches Orvest in 40 days. 40 days is survivable," Adara said, looking at the market around her. "If the orc traders keep enough presence in the market to demonstrate continued treaty participation. They cannot keep full presence under 60% taxation," Vola said. "No," Adara agreed. "They cannot." She looked at Jeremiah. "What about you, innkeeper? You have been in this market longer than half these stall holders." "What about me?" he said. "You have the only indoor meeting space at the crossroads," she said. "If we want to coordinate a response, human traders filing a joint complaint, orc traders maintaining enough token presence to keep the treaty intact, someone getting word to the circuit arbiter before Crane finds a reason to delay the circuit, it would help to have a central place." Jeremiah thought about what this would cost, about Crane's collectors and what they would do when they noticed the inn being used as a meeting place. He thought about Pell, the steward who had stopped talking about the false letter and then had stopped being visible altogether. He thought about a bow repaired in lamplight, and a woman staring at her hands with something in her face that had nothing to do with the bow and everything to do with what it meant to have something broken that mattered to you suddenly made whole. "The common room is available every evening after the kitchen closes," he said. "Tell the people who need to know." Adara Sul smiled at him. It was a small, fierce smile. Then she looked at Vola. "You planned this," Vola said. "I planned to make contact and gather information. The rest has developed on its own." "The rest," Adara said, looking between them, "looks like a coalition." She turned back to her spices. "Come back tonight." They walked back through the market toward the inn. The day had warmed, and the market noise was up carters and buyers and the clang from the iron goods corner where two men were demonstrating blade tempers with dramatic enthusiasm. Vola walked at his side now, not ahead, and he noticed she had adjusted her pace to match his without appearing to think about it. "You knew they would listen to you," he said. "You are very good at giving information in a way that makes people understand the stakes." "I have had practice," she said, echoing his own words back to him. She glanced sideways, amber eyes catching the light, and the almost smile was there again. "The Fenwick brothers were afraid of me." "They were at first," he said. "They got over it. Because you vouched for me." "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. The market noise rolled around them. A child ran between two stalls and nearly hit her legs. She stepped aside without breaking stride, and the child, realizing what she had nearly collided with, froze, stared upward at Vola with enormous eyes. Vola looked down at the child with an expression that was, Jeremiah thought, calibrated to be the least frightening version of her face she could produce. It was only partially successful. The child ran back the way she had come. Vola watched her go. "Children are always honest," she said, not bitterly, just as an observation. "Children see size first," he said. "That's not judgment, that's just how eyes work." She glanced at him. "That is a kind interpretation." "I am a kind interpreter," he said. She made the sound again, the concession sound, and they walked into the inn out of the afternoon sun. The meetings that followed over the next 5 evenings were quiet and careful, and exactly as tense as they needed to be. Adara Sul came with 2 of the guild-connected traders she trusted. The Fenwick brothers came with their cousin, who turned out to have a copy of the border territory charter that predated Crane's appointment by 40 years. 2 orc traders came, not warriors, but merchants, a man and a woman from different clan affiliates who had been using the market for a decade each, and who spoke lowland trade tongue without accent. Vola was there every night, sitting at the corner of the bar with her bow across her knees, saying less than she had said to Adara and the Fenwicks that first day, but watching everything with those amber eyes. Jeremiah kept the coffee going and stayed out of the discussions except when someone asked him a direct question, which was more often than he expected. He had been in the border market long enough to know things, who had authority and who performed it, which roads Crane's collectors rode, and on what schedule, which of the market's stall holders were sympathetic to the coalition, and which were too afraid. He gave what information he had when it was asked for, and the rest of the time he kept the mugs filled and the fire up and the door locked after hours. On the 3rd night, after the last of the coalition members had gone and the fire was burning low, Vola did not go upstairs. She stayed at the bar. Jeremiah was wiping down the counter, a habitual motion that he did not think about anymore, like breathing, and she was sitting very still with her bow in her hands, not looking at anything in particular. He had extended her stay twice now without discussing money. She had not asked him to, and he had not asked her to stay. She was just there every morning and every evening, and in between she moved through the market with the purposeful calm of someone who had taken on a task and intended to see it through. He had stopped thinking of her as a guest. "You are not sleeping," he said. It was not a question. "I sleep," she said, lightly. "Do you want something warm?" Merritt left the bone broth on the hanger. She considered this. "Yes." He ladled 2 cups, one for her, one for himself, because he wasn't sleeping well either and he might as well admit it, and brought them to the bar. She curled both hands around the cup the way she had curled them around the coffee that first morning, and the gesture, repeated, made something in his chest go warm and complicated. "The coalition is real," she said. "It is better than I hoped." "Adara is good at building things quickly," he said. "She has done it before. And you—" "I just made space," he said. "That is all I did." Vola shook her head slowly. "You did more than that. You vouched for me when you had no reason to. You made introductions when it was not your problem to make. You gave them the meeting place when it put you at risk." She paused. "I have been watching you for 5 nights, Jeremiah Keller, and I cannot determine what your angle is." He looked at her. In the firelight, her skin had a warmth to it, the gray-green deep and complicated, and her eyes were darker than they were in daylight, the amber gone almost to bronze. "There is no angle," he said simply. "There is always an angle. In my experience," he said, "the people who say that are the ones who have been given the most reasons to believe it." He picked up his cup. "I am sorry for whatever reasons you have been given." She was quiet for a long moment. The fire settled. Outside, the wind from the hills moved through the crossroads and the inn creaked, the way old buildings creak, like something comfortable in its own bones. "My mother's clan had a phrase," Vola said. "For a person who helps without gain. The translation is rough. It means something like a still hand in wind. The idea that stillness in a storm is itself a kind of protection." She looked at the fire. "I have not met many still hands." He didn't say anything. He just sat with that. "The bow," she said. "When I came down that morning and saw it on the bar, I knew what you had done before I touched it, and I stood there and I thought, this person did a thing for me that cost him time and skill and sleep, and he did not tell me he was going to do it, and he did not expect anything for it." She turned the cup in her hands. "I did not know what to do with that." "You stared at your hands," he said quietly. She looked at him sharply. "You saw that?" "Yes." Another silence. This one was different from the others, warmer and narrower, the distance between them across the bar suddenly more present as a thing, the way an empty space becomes more noticeable when you begin to think about what might fill it. "I have been a warrior for 9 years," she said. "I have been trusted with weapons and missions and lives. I have never been given something small that asked nothing in return." A pause. "It undid me a little. I did not want you to see that." "I didn't say anything," he said. "No," she said. "You poured coffee. That seemed right." It was right. She looked at him. The firelight moved across her face, and she was beautiful, he thought, not in spite of who she was, but completely because of it. The strength and the sharpness and the quiet underneath both of those things. The grief she carried for her mother, and the mission she was holding in her spine, and the tiny, unguarded thing that had crossed her face when she looked at her own hands holding the repaired bow and had not, entirely, been able to put the walls back up fast enough. She reached across the bar and put her hand over his. It was not a tentative gesture. It was a deliberate one, warm and solid, her fingers covering his, her thumb pressing gently against the inside of his wrist. He felt his pulse respond to that and did nothing to hide it. "I want to ask you something," she said. "Ask," he said. "Do you intend to be somewhere else than this inn? After the coalition has done what it is trying to do, after Crane's claim is defeated, do you intend to go somewhere?" He thought about it. Really thought about it the same way he thought about every question she asked him. "I built this place because I wanted to build something," he said. "Not because I had somewhere else to be. This is where I am." A pause. "Why?" She looked at him. Her hand was still on his. The fire crackled. "Because I need to know if what I am thinking is a foolish thought," she said. "What are you thinking?" She was quiet for long enough that he thought she was not going to answer. Then she said, "I am thinking that I came here to do one thing and I have found something else, or someone else. And I am not sure what to do about that because I have not done this before, and what I mean by this is—" She stopped, tried again. "Warriors of my clan, when we choose a companion, we choose plainly. We do not dance around it, so I am choosing plainly." She looked at him steadily. "You interest me. You matter to me. That happened faster than I expected, and I am not sorry about it." The warmth in his chest had been building for 3 evenings at least, and hearing her say it plainly, the way she had described, it arrived like something that had been expected and was welcome and hit harder anyway for being real. "You matter to me too," he said. "You have since the first morning." "The bow," she said. "Before the bow," he said. "When you told me your name so I would know whose door it was." The almost smile became a real one. It was brief, and it transformed her face completely, and he wanted to see it again immediately. She squeezed his hand once and let go, and he let her, understanding that this was not a withdrawal but a first step, the kind that promised more steps without rushing them. She took her empty cup and went upstairs, and he sat by the fire for a long time in the kind of silence that no longer felt heavy. The trouble came on the 9th day. It came in the form of 4 men in Crane's gray livery, who rode into the market just before midday and went directly to the Fenwick brothers' cloth wagon. Jeremiah was outside refilling a rain barrel when he heard the raised voices and crossed the market yard to see what was happening. Don Fenwick was standing with his arms crossed and his face red, confronting a collector with the official manner of a man who had decided that being afraid was less comfortable than being angry. The collector, a rangy man with a thin beard and an expression of permanent administrative disdain, was reading from a paper. His 3 companions had positioned themselves around the wagon with the practiced nonchalance of men whose job was to make it difficult to say no. "Surcharges," the collector was saying. "Retroactive assessment under the Governor's Emergency Commerce Act. 40 silver for the past 3 market days plus today." "You cannot retroactively assess," Don began. "The Act grants that authority," the collector said, as though Don had not spoken. Jeremiah stopped beside Don. "Can I see the document?" The collector turned to him with an expression that recalculated who was in his way. "And you are Jeremiah Keller. The inn at the crossroads is part of the market territory," he said. "I have an interest in what documents are being applied here." "Then fetch your silver," the collector said, "because your establishment is on the same assessment." "Show me the document," Jeremiah said again. A silence. Around the market, people had stopped. Stall holders were watching. 2 of the orc traders who had come to the meetings were visible at the far edge of the market square, and they had gone very still. The collector started to hand over the document with the air of a man who expected it to end the conversation. Jeremiah took it and read it. He read it slowly and carefully, and the collector clearly expected this to take longer than it did, because after 30 seconds Jeremiah looked up and said, "This references the governing warrant that Lord Crane claims as his authority for the Emergency Commerce Act. That warrant has not been verified by a lawful arbiter. It has also been contested by a formal petition that was filed 12 days ago." He held the paper back out. "Without a verified warrant, the Emergency Act has no legal standing, which means the surcharge has no legal standing." The collector looked at him. "Who told you about a petition?" "That would be me." Vola's voice came from behind him. She had not been in the market. He had not seen her leave the inn, but she was there now, and she had crossed the market yard with the particular quality of movement that her kind of training produced, the kind that covered ground without appearing to hurry. Her bow was across her back, her short blade at her hip, and she was carrying herself at full height, which in any crowd drew the eye like a banner. The collector's 3 companions shifted, not dramatically, just enough for hands to drift toward hilts. Vola took note of this the way she took note of most things, with no outward reaction whatsoever. She came to stand beside Jeremiah and looked at the collector. "The petition was filed by representatives of both human and orc trade interests in this market," she said. "It has been forwarded to the circuit arbiter who is scheduled to reach Orvast in 31 days. The filing has legal standing under the original Border Territory Charter, which predates the current administration's appointment. The surcharge assessment you are attempting to collect today falls within the contested period and cannot be enforced without the arbiter's ruling." She paused. "This is not my opinion. This is the charter text." The collector stared at her. His companions had stopped moving. Around the market, no one was pretending to do anything else anymore. Every eye was on the gray-liveried men, and the woman who had walked out of nowhere and spoken like she had the entire legal history of the territory memorized. "You are an orc," the collector said, flatly, as if this resolved something. "I am aware of that," Vola said. "The charter does not distinguish." One of the companions made a decision that the others had not finished making and drew his blade. It happened fast. Jeremiah caught the motion peripherally, and had time to register what it was before Vola's hand was already in motion. The bow was off her shoulder in one movement, an arrow was on the string in the next, and the draw was smooth and full, and the repaired splice held perfectly. The arrow was aimed at the companion's chest at a distance of 12 feet before he had finished extending his arm. Complete silence. The collector did not move. The companion did not move. The blade was extended and the bow was drawn, and every trader in the market had frozen in place. "He drew on a lawful discussion," Vola said. Her voice was entirely level. "That makes this defense. She held the draw without any visible effort. He can put it away." A long, long beat. The companion looked at the collector. The collector's jaw worked. The blade went back into the scabbard. Vola lowered the bow. She did not put the arrow away immediately. She held it loose in her fingers and she looked at the collector, and her expression was the most controlled thing Jeremiah had ever watched a person produce. Utterly still, utterly certain, not threatening, not gloating, just present. "The surcharge will not be collected today," she said. "Tell Lord Crane that the petition exists and that the market traders are aware of their rights under the original charter. The arbiter will determine the rest." The collector took his paper back from Jeremiah's outstretched hand, turned, and led his men out of the market. The sound of their horses faded down the east road. No one in the market moved for about 4 seconds. Then Don Fenwick let out a long breath that was almost a laugh, and around the market 12 people started talking at once, and one of the orc traders crossed the yard and stopped in front of Vola, and said something in Highland dialect that Jeremiah did not catch, and Vola responded briefly, and the orc trader nodded and stepped back with an expression that was clearly respect. Jeremiah looked at Vola. She was putting the arrow back in the quiver, the bow settling across her back with the ease of long habit. She looked at him sideways. "The bow held," he said. "The bow held," she confirmed. He felt something glow in his chest that had nothing to do with winning anything. "You could have been killed," he said. "That man had 3 yards of reach advantage. He had a short sword," she said. "I had 12 feet and an arrow already notched. The math was clear." "The math," he said. "The math," she said firmly. "Do not make it romantic." "Too late," he said before he thought about it. She stared at him. Then the real smile appeared again, wider this time, and she turned away from it and went back toward the inn, and he followed her, and the market noise rose behind them like a tide coming in. That evening she came downstairs while he was closing up, and she put her hands on the bar and looked at him with something clear and determined in her amber eyes, and she said, "Come walk with me." They walked out into the crossroads night, which was cold and full of stars and smelled of wood smoke and the dry grass hills. The market was dark and the road was quiet, and she walked with her shoulder almost touching his, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her even through the night air. "When I was holding the draw on that man today," she said, "I was thinking about the bow. Specifically, I was thinking about your hands on it, in the lamplight, the way you worked." She paused. "That was not a useful thing to be thinking about in that moment." "But you held the draw," he said. "I am very disciplined," she said. He laughed. It came out genuine and surprised, and she looked at him when he laughed with an expression that was soft in a way she clearly was not accustomed to allowing herself to be soft. "Jeremiah," she said. "Yes." They had stopped walking. They were standing on the road at the actual crossroads where the 3 roads met in the dark. He could see the inn behind them with one window still lit, old Marrett's room. He could see the market's dark shapes. He could see the hills, which were just shapes against a sky white with stars. "I told you I choose plainly," she said. So I am choosing plainly again. I want to be near you. I want to stay near you, which is not the same thing as what brought me here. The mission is separate. What I want is, this is harder to say in Lowland tongue, there is a word in the Highland dialect that means choosing a person as the one you walk toward. Not just choosing to like them or wanting their company, choosing the direction of them. He looked at her. The starlight caught the iron rings in her braid and the ivory of her tusks and the shape of her face, strong-boned and earnest and completely without artifice. I am choosing the direction of you too, he said. I have been since the morning with the bow. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached up and put one hand against the side of his face, her thumb at his jaw, and she kissed him. It was not tentative. It was warm and firm and tasted of the evening's bitter coffee and something that was entirely her own, and he put his hand over hers at his jaw and kissed her back with all the feeling that had been building for 9 days in the space between them. When they separated, she was very close to him, close enough that he could see the detail of her irises in the dark, the warm amber lit from inside somehow. That word, she said, the Highland one. The one that means choosing the direction of a person. Yes, it also means I am yours, she said, if you will have me. Vola, he said, yes, I will have you, he said, entirely. She pressed her forehead to his, and he felt the careful tips of her tusks just at his cheek, warm and solid, and he did not flinch, and she knew he would not, and that knowledge moved through her like something releasing. They walked back to the inn together under the stars, and the loneliness that had sat in him like a piece of furniture for 3 years was simply not there anymore. The next 3 weeks were the hardest and the best. Hard because Crane responded to the failed surcharge collection by sending more men, not collectors this time but soldiers, ostensibly to maintain market order, who positioned themselves at the East Road entrance to the market and watched the traders and said nothing out loud, but communicated very clearly that the governor's patience was running. Hard because 2 of the human stallholders quietly withdrew from the coalition, afraid of what visible solidarity might cost them, and Adara Sul had to spend 2 days convincing 3 of the Orc traders' clan contacts not to pull the remaining Orc presence from the market in response to the soldier deployment. Best because every evening after the inn closed, Vola was there. She moved through the coalition meetings with increasing fluency, not just as a carrier of information, but as a strategist, the kind who listened more than she spoke and spoke only when it changed the shape of the room. He watched the human traders stop flinching when she leaned over the table to point at something on the charter copy and start listening to what she was saying instead of watching her hands. He watched Adara Sul begin consulting her directly, as a peer, which was a significant thing from Adara Sul, who consulted almost no one as a peer. And he learned her, in the way you learn a person when you are around them every day with the walls down, the way she held her coffee cup, the way she went quiet when she was actually most engaged, the way she laughed, which she did rarely and with her whole body, a sound like something unexpected and joyful. She had a scar that ran from her left ear to the angle of her jaw that she had gotten at 19 in a clan boundary dispute, and that she did not volunteer information about but would answer questions about honestly if asked. She had opinions about the best method for fletching arrows that were detailed and strongly held. She did not sleep well in the room at the end of the hall and had eventually admitted, without embarrassment, that she slept better when she could hear another person nearby. So on the 12th night he had left the door between their rooms which adjoined, a fact of the inn's floorplan he had not previously found significant ajar, and the next morning she had said, without looking at him, that it had been better. He found this information very important and entirely wonderful. They were not yet fully together. That was a word she used, and it meant something specific that was worth being clear about. But they were moving toward it with the deliberateness of 2 people who were very certain of what they were moving toward. She touched him freely and without self-consciousness, her hand on his when she wanted his attention, her shoulder against his when they sat beside each other at the bar, her head tilted toward him when they spoke quietly in the dark. He matched her in kind, and every point of contact felt like something building rather than something temporary. The night before the 22nd day, 9 days before the circuit arbiter was due in Orvest, Crane made his move. It came through the inn door at nearly midnight in the form of Wren Fenwick, who had clearly been running and was out of breath and badly frightened. "They've arrested Don," he said. "Crane's soldiers. They took him out of his wagon 2 hours ago, said he was being held for questioning about seditious commerce interference." He looked at Jeremiah and then at Vola, who was already on her feet with her bow in hand. "They're saying anyone who filed the petition or participated in the coalition meetings is liable to the same charge." "Seditious commerce interference is not a real charge under the original charter," Vola said. "It doesn't have to be real if Crane controls the holding cells and the arbiter is still 9 days out," Adara Sul said. She had come in behind Wren. She must have been at the market late and heard the news directly. She looked as sharp as always, but tightly controlled. "He is going to hold people until after the arbiter arrives and then use the holding as leverage. Either the coalition withdraws the petition or the held traitors face formal charges in front of a sympathetic local magistrate. He would not hold orc traitors under lowland law," Vola said. "That would breach the treaty directly. But human traitors, yes. Don Fenwick is the primary signatory on the charter petition," Wren said. "If he recants under pressure, he won't recant," Adara said, with confidence that might have been slightly more than the evidence warranted but that Jeremiah appreciated anyway. "Then we need the arbiter in less than 9 days, Jeremiah said. Everyone looked at him. "The circuit arbiter rides a set route," he said, "but the route has a variable start point. If someone meets him on the road and presents the situation, he has the authority to advance his schedule in cases of active treaty violation or unlawful detention." He looked at Vola. "The road north to the arbiter's current position would take someone through the mountain pass, someone who knows highland terrain, someone who can move fast. 2 days' ride if I push," she said immediately. "I know," he said. He looked at her. She looked at him. "You're not telling me not to go." "I would not tell you not to go," he said. "I am telling you to be careful. Crane's soldiers know what you look like after the market square." "They know what I look like," she agreed. "That has never stopped me." He reached under the bar and produced a sealed letter. He had written it 2 hours ago, when the news of increased military presence near the market had first filtered through, before Wren had arrived. He had written it because he had been sitting alone with the feeling that something was about to happen, and he had found the most useful thing he could do and had done it. The letter was addressed to Circuit Arbiter Thuron Vast by name, and it contained a concise, sourced summary of the entire situation, the petition filing, the charter citations, the unlawful taxation mechanism, and now, he added a line quickly by lamplight, the unlawful detention of a petition signatory. He handed the letter to Vola. She took it and held it for a moment, reading his face. "I will be back," she said. "I know," he said. "Jeremiah." "Yes. Leave the door ajar," she said quietly. "When I get back." He felt that land in his chest like a promise. "It will be," he said. She tucked the letter into her jerkin, checked her quiver, slung the bow across her shoulder and went out the door into the dark. He did not sleep well that night. He managed the next day and the day after by going through the motions with precision, because precision was what he had when focus slipped, and he answered questions from the coalition members who came to the inn in worried knots, and he kept the coffee going, and he kept his fear about her on the mountain road contained in a small room inside himself that he was able to mostly not enter. On the 3rd evening after she left, with 6 days still to go before the arbiter's scheduled arrival, the inn door opened and Vola walked in. She was dusty and her cloak had a tear along the hem, and she had a bruise along her right cheekbone that she had not had when she left. But she was whole, and she was upright, and she was carrying herself in the way she carried herself when a thing had been done and done successfully. He was around the bar and across the room before he had decided to move. She accepted his hands on her face, gently, checking the bruise, and then she pulled him in by the front of his shirt and held him for a moment, and he wrapped his arms around her and felt the solid reality of her, the warmth and the height and the particular way she breathed, and it was the most complete sensation he could remember. "The arbiter," he said into her hair. "3 days," she said. "He is already moving. He read your letter." She pulled back enough to look at him. He called it the most organized petition summary he had received in 11 years of circuit. "That is a very good sentence," he said. "I thought you would like it." She looked at the bruise on her own face in the mirror behind the bar and then looked back at him. "A patrol. I went around them. It is nothing. It does not look like nothing." "Jeremiah," she said, with a patience that was also fondness, "I am a warrior. I came back. That is what matters." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he took her by the hand and led her to a stool at the bar, and he got water and a clean cloth and he pressed it carefully to the bruise, and she let him, sitting still under his hands with an expression of someone who was, for once, allowing themselves to be taken care of, and he understood what it cost her and what it meant that she was letting him anyway. "The mission is almost done," she said, while he was tending the bruise. He heard the weight in that. He set down the cloth and looked at her. "And then," he said, "and then I report to the clan elders," she said. "The coalition holds. The treaty is intact. Crane's claim fails." A pause. "And then I have to decide what I want." "What do you want?" he asked. She looked at him steadily. "I want to stay," she said. "That is what I want." He felt the simple, clean truth of it settle him. "Then stay," he said. "The clan will want to know why," she said. "I am a warrior. I have duties and affiliations and responsibilities." "I know," he said. "I am not asking you to wait," she said carefully. "I am telling you what the complications are." "Vola," he said, "I have been waiting my whole life for something worth staying for. I can wait a bit more for the logistics." She looked at him with something complicated and very warm in her eyes, and then she leaned forward and pressed her mouth to his, brief and sure, and it felt like a seal on something already decided. Arbiter Thuron Vast rode into Orvast 4 days later with 2 sworn witnesses, and a copy of the original border territory charter that his office kept separately from any regional administration. He was a tall, gray-bearded man with the unhurried manner of someone who had dealt with dishonest local governance before, and was not surprised by it, but also not amused. He held open hearings at the market, which was the legally required venue for treaty-related disputes in neutral territory. The coalition presented the petition, the charter citations, the tax records that Adara Sul had painstakingly collected showing the rate's punitive structure, and the fact of Don Fenwick's detention, which was still ongoing, a fact that Vast received with raised eyebrows and a very controlled expression of displeasure. Crane sent a representative but did not come himself, which Vast noted in the official record with a flat tone that suggested he was making several conclusions simultaneously. Don Fenwick was released from holding before the second day of hearings. He arrived at the market with a bruise on his jaw and a fury that Wren talked him down from before he could do anything inadvisable, and he gave his testimony with a clarity and detail that suggested captivity had given him a great deal of time to organize his thoughts. Vola gave testimony on behalf of the clan elders. She stood in the center of the market, under the open sky, with the orc and human traders both watching, and she presented the clan's position in measured, precise language that left no interpretive room. She cited the charter, the treaty terms, the specific taxation dates and their effect on orc trade volume, and the incident on the road where Crane's collectors had attempted to seize her goods by force, which constituted a treaty violation independent of the taxation question. Arbiter Vast listened to everything. He asked careful questions. He looked at documents. He adjourned the first day's hearing and held a private session with Crane's representative on the second morning that lasted 2 hours, and that Crane's representative emerged from with the expression of a man who had been told something he had not expected to be told. On the afternoon of the second day, Vast delivered his ruling in the market square. The warrant Lord Crane had presented as his governing authority could not be verified as genuine. It would be referred to the seat of central governance for formal investigation. Pending that investigation, Crane's authority over the border territory was suspended. The Emergency Commerce Act and all assessments made under it were void. The taxes collected retroactively were to be refunded with interest from the administration's accounts. Don Fenwick's detention was ruled unlawful and compensable. The treaty was intact. The land reverted to its jointly held status under the original charter, and the mineral rights claims Crane had been positioning to make were null. The market square made noise. It was not quite a cheer. It was the sound of a large number of people who have been under pressure for several months exhaling at once, and then beginning slowly to remember that things could be normal. Vola was standing beside Jeremiah when the ruling came down. She had her arms crossed and her bow across her back, and her face was still, the way her face went still when she was absorbing something important. He could see her jaw working slightly, the muscle in her cheek, the tight control. Then she turned to him and he saw her eyes, and there was nothing controlled about them. They were bright and full of something that was relief and grief and victory all at once, and he thought about her mother's bow, held together at the splice, and about a woman staring at her hands with something that needed to break open and didn't know how to. He put his arm around her shoulders. She did not move away. She leaned into it just slightly, and they stood there together in the market square in the afternoon light while the ruling settled around them, and he felt her breathe, and she felt him stand solid beside her, and the crowd moved and celebrated around them, and none of it touched the thing that was just between the two of them. That evening was the best one yet. Adara Sol brought wine, real wine, not the market's usual rough stuff, a bottle she had apparently been saving for something she was confident enough to save for. The Fenwick brothers came with their cousin, and another trader Jeremiah didn't know but liked immediately, and the two orc traders who had maintained market presence through the worst of it, and the four of them took up a table and talked and laughed with a volume that the inn had not heard since Jeremiah had opened it. Marit made her best pot, something with mushrooms and salt pork and a full day's simmering, and she brought it out in a pride of laden bowls, and Jeremiah did not touch the bar counter once all evening, because he was sitting at a table with people who had done something hard together and had succeeded, and it felt like what a celebration was supposed to feel like rather than what he usually imagined it might be. Vola sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. She ate with the unself-conscious thoroughness of someone who had spent 3 weeks under considerable stress and had just put it down, and she drank Adara's wine slowly and with appreciation, and when Ren Fenwick said something she found funny she laughed, the whole body laugh, sudden and uninhibited, and Jeremiah watched it happen, and felt something in his chest that he recognized as happiness in its most uncomplicated form. Later, after the last guest had gone and Marit had retreated to her room with the satisfaction of someone whose cooking had been appropriately honored, Jeremiah banked the fire and found Vola at the bar with the last of the wine in her cup, watching the coals. He sat down beside her. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. "I have to go to the clan," she said. "I leave in 3 days. I need to report in person and formally. The elders will want to hear it directly, and there are protocols." "I know," he said. "I will be gone perhaps 2 weeks," she said. "Perhaps a little more, depending on what questions they have." "And then," he said, she looked at him. "And then I told you what I want," she said. "That has not changed." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "When you come back, if you want to come back to the inn, and if you want to stay, there is a room with an east window that I have not rented to anyone else, and I do not intend to." She looked at him. The amber eyes in the firelight were warm and entirely without walls. "An east window," she said. "Best light in the morning," he said. "You should have it." She set her cup down. She turned on her stool to face him and took his face in both hands, large hands and warm, and she looked at him with everything out where he could see it, the choosing, the wanting, the something that was deeper than those things, the thing that was too important to name quickly and that did not need to be named quickly because it was already decided. "I am going to come back, Jeremiah Keller," she said, "and I am going to stay." "I know," he said. She kissed him then, with the firelight at her back and her hands at his face, and he kissed her back with the full weight of everything he had been waiting for without knowing he was waiting for it. She tasted of wine and smoke and something that was entirely hers, and when she pulled him closer by the back of the neck, he went willingly and completely, and the silence of the inn around them was not empty but full of the particular sound of two people who have stopped being alone. She left 3 days later, as she had said she would, at first light, bow across her back and the road stretching north into the hills. She had said goodbye to him inside, held him in the dark of the early morning in the room with the east window, pressed her face against his neck and stayed there for a long moment, and then she had walked out, because she was a warrior and she had a duty to fulfill, and she walked toward her duties the same way she walked through everything, without hesitation, without looking back to see if anyone was watching. He watched anyway. He ran the inn. He mended a wagon wheel for a drover who passed through. He had the doorframe properly repaired where the arrow had split it. He patched the section of roof over the storeroom that had been threatening to let in rain since summer. He made introductions and kept the coffee going and woke up every morning in a bed that felt correctly sized for one person but somehow larger than it needed to be. He left the door ajar. On the 15th night he was sitting by the fire with a cup in his hand, doing the thing he usually did at this hour, which was sit and feel the quiet, when he heard a horse on the road outside. 2 horses, actually. He listened to them stop and heard boots on the ground, and he did not move because he was already certain. The door opened. Vola came in first. She was travel-worn and there was mud on her boots and her braid had 2 new iron rings in it, a clan acknowledgement, he would learn later, for mission success and treaty preservation, and her amber eyes found him the moment she crossed the threshold, the way they always did, directly and without searching. Behind her came another orc, a woman perhaps a decade older, broad-shouldered and gray-braided, wearing the mark of a clan elder at her collar. The elder looked at the inn and then at Jeremiah and then at Vola with an expression that was entirely readable as "I am here because you asked me to come, and I intend to see for myself." Jeremiah stood. He set his cup down. "Jeremiah Keller," Vola said, and there was something in her voice that was careful and deliberate. "This is Elder Sarah of the Highland Confederation. She is my mother's elder sister." A pause. "She asked to meet you." Elder Sarah looked at him with the evaluative gaze of someone who had spent a very long time judging people and situations accurately and was applying that skill now. He met her eyes. He did not straighten or shift or do any of the things that people did when they were performing confidence. He just looked at her directly and waited. "You repaired my niece's bow," the elder said. Her lowland tongue was accented but clear. "I did," he said, "without being asked." "Yes." A silence. "Why?" He said what he had said to Vola. "Because it was broken and I knew how to fix it and it seemed like a bad thing for it to stay broken." He paused. "And because it was her mother's bow, so it mattered more than it being just a bow." Sarah held his gaze for a long moment. Then she said something in the Highland dialect to Vola. Vola answered briefly. Sarah said something else, shorter. Vola's expression shifted, not to surprise, but to the kind of stillness that is stillness before something important. "She says," Vola said carefully, "that she came to see if you were worth the concern she has spent on the idea of you for 15 days. She has decided you are." "I am glad to hear it," he said. "She also says," Vola continued, "that she will not tell me what to do because I am my mother's daughter and my mother's daughter has never been told what to do successfully." She looked at him and the smile was there, full and warm. "She says that is a problem she has made peace with." Elder Sarah sat herself at the bar with the manner of a woman who was going to want something hot and was willing to wait for it. And Jeremiah turned to make it and Vola came around the bar and took the ladle from him and kissed him once briefly, while Sarat was examining the room with aristocratic thoroughness. Then she handed the ladle back and came around to sit beside her aunt, and Jeremiah made 3 cups and brought them to the bar, and the 3 of them sat together in the warm light of the inn at the crossroads, while the fire burned and the night pressed soft against the windows. Sarat left the next morning with the blessing of a woman who had seen something that satisfied her, and the caution of one who kept her approvals reserved but genuine. She embraced Vola at the door, a brief, fierce press of forehead to forehead that was clearly the Highland way of it, and she looked at Jeremiah and said, in the careful lowland tongue, "She has been hard to love since she lost her mother. Not because she is unloving, because she is careful about where she puts it." A pause. "Do not make her regret where she has put it." "I will not," he said. "I promise." Sarat nodded once and rode north. The autumn came into the border market with cooler nights and the smell of wood smoke constant in the air. The orc traders came back in full more than before, actually, because the ruling had clarified protections that had always been technically in the charter but had never been tested, and the clan affiliates that had been cautious about the market for years now had legal ground to stand on. The market grew. New stalls went up. 2 new inns broke ground on the South Road, which Jeremiah noted without concern because the Crossroads market was big enough for 3 inns, and his was the oldest and best known, and besides he had something now that he had not had before, which was a reason to be genuinely happy every day he was in it. Vola stayed. She was not a tavern worker, she was a warrior, and she said so without apology, and he never asked her to be anything else. She helped with what she felt like helping with, which was sometimes a great deal and sometimes not much, and she spent significant parts of her days at the market in a capacity that evolved naturally into something like a liaison, an orc warrior who spoke lowland trade tongue, and who had the standing of mission success, and the reputation of the market's square standoff, and the arbiter's hearing, and who walked through the stalls in her fitted warrior's leathers with the bow across her back and her head up, and who was greeted by orc traders and human traders with equal directness. She negotiated disputes on her own authority because she was good at it, and because people trusted her judgment, and because, she told Jeremiah once with the flat honesty that was her way, she liked having something useful to do. He watched her be useful with a pride that surprised him in its depth. She asked him, one evening while they were sitting on the inn's back step watching the hills, what he had been before the inn. He told her, the 3rd son of a farming family, too many brothers and not enough land, so he had left at 18 with a small stake and a determination to build something of his own. He had been a drover's assistant for 2 years and then a trader's errand man for 1, and then he had found the crumbling way station and had recognized it as the thing that was waiting for him. She listened to all of this without interrupting, which was how she always listened, and when he was done she said, "You left something that was too small for you and built something that fit." "Yes," he said. "I suppose that is it exactly." She looked at the hills. "That is what I have been doing too," she said quietly. "For 9 years of warrior work and missions. I was always capable of more than one place and one role, but I did not know what the rest looked like." A pause. "Now I think I am starting to." He looked at her profile against the fading sky. He reached over and took her hand. She turned it so their fingers were interlaced and held on. The winter came on fast. The mountain pass northward closed early that year, and the market went to its winter rhythm, smaller, quieter, regular traders only. The inn stayed full enough. The fire stayed large. And Marat, who had absorbed Vola's permanent presence into the inn's daily life with the pragmatic adaptability of a woman who had worked for Jeremiah long enough to trust his instincts, taught her to make the barley and herb pot, which Vola learned quickly because she had strong opinions about seasoning. On a night in deep winter when the crossroads were quiet and the fire was high, and the snow was coming down in the specific way, it came down in hill country, steady and soft, and entirely committed. They were sitting together on the wide settle that Jeremiah had moved from its original spot by the window to the better spot near the fire because Vola had sat in it the first time and had looked at the fire from it, and he had thought, she should have this seat, and had moved it the next morning. And she had come downstairs and seen it moved and had looked at him, and had not said anything, and had sat down in it with a settled air that meant everything. He was leaning back and she was tucked against his side with her legs stretched toward the fire, the bow propped against the wall within her reach because that was always where she put it, and the inn was quiet and the fire was warm, and outside the snow came down in the patient way of the Highland winter. "Tell me something you want," she said. "Right now. Right now." He thought about it. "This," he said. "Right now, exactly this." She was quiet for a moment. He felt her settle closer. "I am going to tell you something," she said, "in the Highland dialect, and then I am going to tell you what it means, and I want you to know that I have said it to one person before in my life, and that was my mother, and she is gone." He went very still, not in the way of someone who is afraid, but in the way of someone who understands that something important is coming and wants to receive it properly. She said it. It was a low sound, short, with a weight to the syllables that the words carried the way certain words carry the whole of what they mean inside the sound of them. Then she said, "It means, you are the home I chose." He turned his head and looked at her, and she looked up at him, and the amber eyes in the firelight were open and warm, and completely without the wariness that had been in them that first night when she had stepped through his door like something the road had sent him. He kissed her. Slowly and with all of it, the 3 years of quiet before she had come, and the 9 days of waking up, and the bow in the lamplight in her hands, and the crossroads in the dark, and the fire they were sitting at, and every morning that was going to follow this one. He kissed her with all of it, and she kissed him back the same way, her hand at his jaw the way it had been at the crossroads in the starlight, warm and certain. When they separated, she pressed her forehead to his, and the iron rings in her braid caught the firelight, and she breathed, and he breathed, and the snow came down outside, and the fire held, and the inn held, and the crossroads held all around them. "You are the home I chose too," he said. "That is the only word I need for it." She made the concession sound, low in her throat, but this time it was not a concession to a point in an argument. It was the sound of something that has been wound very tight for a very long time finally letting go. He held her. She let him. The fire burned warm and steady, and outside the market was dark and quiet under its snow, and the 3 roads led away in 3 directions into the wide dark world. And at the heart of all of them, at the place where they crossed, the inn stood lit and solid, full of warmth and the smell of Merritt's good cooking, and the sound of 2 people breathing together in the particular peace of those who have found, after a long time looking without knowing they were looking, exactly where they were supposed to be. The bow hung on the wall hook above the settle, where she had put it that evening, the repaired splice clean and strong in the firelight, the sinew wrapping tight and even, the horn plate solid, the whole thing just as it should be, whole and ready and well used and cared for, the way a thing that matters ought to be. She was asleep against him within the hour, breathing deep and slow, and he sat in the firelight with her warm and solid at his side, and he thought about a woman who had come through his door on a hard night with a broken bow and amber eyes burning with something she had not known what to do with, and about a man who had fixed the bow without being asked, and had not known himself what the gesture was the beginning of. He knew now. He pulled her close and closed his eyes, and the loneliness was over, and it was the best thing he had ever felt in his life.